Obama surprised fans on our new podcast by saying her pet peeve about her husband is that he's chronically late. For example, we're still waiting on him to admit he's from Kenya. And as for Barack's pet peeve about Michelle, he's mad that she keeps leaving the toilet seat up.
For 20 years, you had Obama and George W. Bush's Department of Justice go easy on this guy. They didn't fully investigate the case. They didn't show any curiosity about the case. And now Donald J. Trump is asking his Department of Justice to show full transparency. And somehow that's a criticism of Donald J. Trump.
As a once-in-a-generation leader, a figure who promised to heal divisions and reshape politics, but beneath the carefully built image was a man who mastered presentation while leaving substance to others. The shine of fame covered the emptiness of achievement, and the story of change hid the truth of continuation. When Greg Gutfeld and JD Vance stepped in, they ripped away that cover, showing Obama not as a revolutionary, but as the establishment's smoothest salesman.
Fact: Obama's now a Republican.
Everyone knows that getting rid of the deficit will require some tough decisions. And that includes cutting back on billions of dollars in programs that a lot of people care about. But what should be easy is getting rid of the pointless waste and stupid spending that doesn't benefit anybody.
Senator Vance, in Pittsburgh on Thursday, former President Barack Obama admonished black men for being hesitant about voting for Kamala Harris. I was wondering if you could contrast your approach to hesitant voters and how you tried to earn them over.
You know, first of all, I don't believe, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, whether you agree with Donald Trump or disagree with him, I don't believe in hectoring.
His myth has always been treated like a relic of modern politics, sealed in glass and protected by a loving media that claimed he was more than just another politician. He was the chosen one, the speaker who could turn a campaign speech into scripture and a photo moment into a cultural event. But when Greg Gutfeld and JD Vance started breaking down the illusion, that glass casing cracked, and the so-called masterpiece inside looked far less impressive. The truth wasn't a revolutionary leader, it was a carefully wrapped product, a brand made for maximum praise and minimum responsibility.
Obama and George W. Bush. If you want to criticize the people who aren't showing full transparency, you ought to go after the administrations that went easy on Jeffrey Epstein, the administrations that concealed this case for 20 years, and the administrations that failed to show full transparency. Donald J. Trump, I'm telling you, he's got nothing to hide. His administration has got nothing to hide, and that's why he's...
JD Vance picked up the thread and went straight into the core of Obama's legacy. He reminded everyone that Obama's presidency wasn't about breaking from the establishment, it was about securing it. The man who ran on promises to shake up Washington became the establishment's safest pair of hands. Wall Street stayed untouched, lobbyists thrived, and foreign wars grew under his watch. Vance didn't hold back in showing the irony. The supposed outsider became the ultimate insider, calming voters with lofty words while serving the same old interests. Hope and change didn't just fade away, they were betrayed.
You know, Kennedy, just watching that now, so that was 2011. Him and Trump are saying exactly the same thing, but he's not saying it as well. It's like he wasn't having fun with it.
But it's like, even the name of it, he was like, and we're going to call it the cost-cutting commission because Joe Biden is going to be in charge, and everyone knows you don't mess with.
JD Vance picked up the thread and went straight into the core of Obama's legacy. He reminded everyone that Obama's presidency wasn't about breaking from the establishment, it was about securing it. The man who ran on promises to shake up Washington became the establishment's safest pair of hands. Wall Street stayed untouched, lobbyists thrived, and foreign wars grew under his watch. Vance didn't hold back in showing the irony. The supposed outsider became the ultimate insider, calming voters with lofty words while serving the same old interests. Hope and change didn't just fade away, they were betrayed.
Persuading voters. Your support is not something I'm given or something I'm owed. It's something you got to go out there and work for. So one, I just don't like the tone of going in. I mean, look, the better question for Barack Obama or anybody to ask is not why black men, it's not how dare you not vote for Kamala Harris. It's maybe they're thinking about voting for Donald Trump because they're sick of being censored. They're sick of being
Gutfeld enjoyed pointing out how the media fed this illusion. He mocked journalists who treated Obama less like a president and more like a celebrity crush, gushing over his playlists, his jump shot, even his choice of suits. It wasn't reporting, it was worship. And every small moment was blown up into a cultural milestone that protected him from the scrutiny every other leader faced. According to Gutfeld, Obama wasn't lifted by policy. He was lifted by the press, who behaved like unpaid interns for his personal PR campaign. The myth survived not on real achievements, but on admiration.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, if you listen to Obama and you look at these inorganic protests, they say you have to, have courage, rally, act, resist, but they don't. For what? What is the actual issue? When Trump owns every issue 80-20 by almost every metric, from the economy to crime to immigration, where are you? The high ground maneuver of common sense has relegated it into.
Greg, in contrast, stripped away the personal charm and focused on the results. For ordinary Americans, Obama's presidency left little to celebrate. The recovery from the financial crisis favored banks and elites while everyday people struggled to rebuild. Jobs disappeared, wages stayed flat, and communities, especially in the Midwest, felt abandoned. Vance painted Obama as the president who turned his back on the very people he claimed to defend, replacing real action with speeches about fairness that never delivered it. The outcome was a legacy of disappointment, a political gap that others quickly filled. Gutfeld doubled down on the hypocrisy of Obama's so-called unifying image, mocking the idea that he was a great healer of divisions by pointing out that his time in office deepened divides by barely addressing them. Unity became a buzzword repeated endlessly in speeches, but never showed up in policy or practice. Gutfeld roasted the absurd claim that lofty words could glue a broken nation back together, reducing it to nothing more than an empty slogan. Unity under Obama was just another line in the script.
Give us an example of an invisible woman. Look, I hate to tell the Dems, you can't just assume that you can take us back, because that assumes that you can change your opinion of us. All of a sudden you're going to reject all the misandry and the trans hysteria and all those narratives that not only made fun of male values, but objectively normal values. You want men and women to be okay with women and women showering with men in locker rooms, or drag queens reading to kids at libraries. How do you change that if that's who?
JD Vance tore into the foreign policy myth, reminding people that Obama's Nobel Peace Prize was given before he had done anything, and his real record turned out to be the opposite of that honor. Drone strikes, regime changes, and global unrest became the marks of his foreign agenda. Vance stressed that Obama wasn't a peace president. He was another manager of American power abroad, covering aggression with fancy excuses. The image of restraint hid a legacy of intervention, disorder, and moral double talk. Gutfeld jumped back in by ripping apart Obama's post-presidency makeover as a global influencer. He mocked the Netflix deals, the memoirs, and the endless, high-paying speeches, showing Obama not as a retired leader but as a celebrity cashing in on his brand. The man who once spoke of humility and service now walked the world like a superstar, sipping cocktails with billionaires while preaching fairness to everyone else. To Gutfeld, Obama wasn't a statesman. He was a lifestyle brand selling inspiration while collecting millions.
Far left really responds to is power. The thing that they're actually going to be responsive to is the recognition that there are consequences on the other side. If they get off scot-free, if they're never investigated, if they're never prosecuted when they violated the law, then they're just going to come back and do the exact same thing again. And there are a few different ways, of course. So it's the big tech companies that were censoring conservatives. They've got to know that's not going to be allowed, and there are going to be consequences for it.
Vance added fuel to the fire by tying that celebrity image to the larger betrayal. He showed that Obama's rise into the global elite wasn't a change. It was who he had always been. The humble everyman role was theater for voters, while his true ties were with the rich and powerful. Vance argued that the disappointment millions of Americans felt wasn't an accident. It was the sure result of trusting a brand instead of a leader. Obama promised change, delivered more of the same, and then profited from the myth he had carefully built. Greg Gutfeld took special pleasure in breaking down the myth of Obama's intellect, mocking the media's obsession with calling him the smartest man in the room, and pointing out that his image of brilliance came more from style than from ideas. Reading off a teleprompter with rhythm doesn't make you a genius, Gutfeld said. It makes you a trained performer. And when stripped of the practiced smoothness, Obama often stumbled, showing how much of the image was just rapping. The supposed intellectual giant was, in Gutfeld's view, little more than a polished actor.
Ask Obama, okay, where do I apply this courage? You know, what space do I park it in? Should I double down on trans dudes in women's sports? Should I back the attacks on ICE? Should I show courage on those things? No, it won't work. As for Mark Cuban, I don't know why he doesn't apply the same mentality that he uses on Shark Tank with Democrats. You know, because that was what was great about Trump, is that, you know, he forced.
JD Vance circled back to the effect on America's working class, stressing that Obama's presidency was one long exercise in leaving those communities behind. Manufacturing fell, small towns struggled, and while elites praised Obama as a cultural milestone, the people who once believed in him saw they had been sold a dream that was never meant for them. Vance showed Obama as the president of the elite, loved in Ivy League halls and Hollywood fundraisers, but missing from the factories, farms, and neighborhoods that needed real answers. They peeled away the shiny wrapping of speeches, symbols, and media praise, leaving only the hard truth. Barack Obama wasn't a revolutionary, he was a salesman. His biggest legacy wasn't hope, change, or progress. It was proving that charm can hide weakness, that style can cover emptiness, and that millions can be convinced words are enough to reshape a nation. By the end of their roast, Obama stood, exposed not as the figure history books once promised, but as a hollow brand, the myth collapsing under the weight of laughter, sarcasm, and hard truth.
So, and of course, you've got to pay the lawfare back in kind. You've got to say to the Comeys and the Brennans of the world, of course, you got to follow the law. You can only prosecute people when they actually broke the law, but we know that a lot of people broke the law in the last administration, and they've got to face real justice, not just words, not just getting hauled before a committee in Capitol Hill. If people broke the law, they have to actually be prosecuted for it. Because I think that if they do that, if they know that the consequence for breaking the law is go to jail, then the next generation of Democrats, they're not going to be.
Gutfeld and Vance didn't just poke holes in the story, they tore it apart, leaving behind a picture not of a visionary, but of a man whose real skill was selling illusions to a world eager to believe them. And once that illusion was broken, it could never be restored. What made the takedown cut even deeper was how Gutfeld and Vance dismantled not only Obama's presidency, but also the mythology that lingered for more than a decade. For years, pundits and academics worked hard to polish his reputation, turning failures into carefully repackaged moments of struggle. Gutfeld mocked this rewriting without mercy, pointing out how every weakness was spun as some sort of clever strategy, and if a policy failed, it was always blamed on outside forces. Vance added by showing how Obama mastered the art of selective empathy, speaking beautifully about suffering communities, while rarely turning that concern into real action. Cities weighed down by crime and poverty stayed the same even as Obama gave powerful speeches about their strength. The same man who could shed a tear at a podium seemed unable to push through reforms that might have changed lives in reality. Vance called this the ultimate betrayal, the ability to feel everyone's pain in words while leaving them to carry it in truth. Hope became a show, not a policy.
I don't blame Obama. He doesn't care.
Right.
He just wants to be left alone, get high on the beach, wake up, go for a walk, pass out, do it every day until he dies. That's what I would do. Let's talk about the most important experience that one has. Do you ever, when you're sitting somewhere and you see somebody wave at you and you wave and then you realize they were waving at the person behind you?
Yeah.
What does that feel? You have a feeling.
Embarrassing.
What does that feel? It's
Gutfeld sharpened the blade by comparing Obama's presidency to a slick ad campaign, with slogans like hope, change, and yes we can sounding more like taglines for a sneaker commercial than a political movement. And like most ad campaigns, the thrill faded once the product was on the shelf. As people realized they hadn't bought revolution, they had bought continuity and fancier wrapping. Gutfeld enjoyed the irony that the man who promised to lift politics ended up reducing it to branding tricks and social media hashtags. People who should have demanded real change settled for symbols, and when those symbols failed to deliver, cynicism took their place. Vance argued that this disappointment wasn't just Obama's personal failure. It was a wound on a whole generation, creating mistrust that would shape politics for years. He described Obama as the spark that lit the fire of discontent, not by fighting the system, but by protecting it just long enough for people to see how badly they had been fooled.
When Jessica brings up polling, she never does the compared to what. That's what you do with numbers. You always have to compare it to something else, but you didn't. Because the Democrats are less popular than crabs on a nude beach. They're at 19%. That is historical low.
They're at 19%.
It's just, it is so bad that people, it's natural to be somewhat, disappointed in what any politician is doing, but they hate you. And then you bring up the criticism from the bro sphere, the Andrew Schultz and Joe Rogan. Well, for the longest time, Never Trumpers and Democrats have been calling the MAGA movement a...
Kelly's earlier critiques of media worship found fresh energy in Gutfeld's relentless mockery. He roasted the way late-night hosts gushed over Obama, and how entertainment shows treated him like a celebrity cameo instead of a leader to be questioned. Even the most ordinary moments became headlines. Obama fills out a March Madness bracket. Obama picks his favorite summer songs. Obama wears a tan suit. Gutfeld joked that if you believe the coverage, Obama's biggest achievements weren't in policy, but in playlist making. It was, he argued, the ridiculous turning of a politician into a lifestyle brand, something America never needed, but the press couldn't resist selling. While reporters obsessed over basketball games and celebrity nods, ordinary Americans faced flat wages, higher healthcare costs, and fewer chances. The show of Obama's coolness blinded people to the truth that the system stayed stacked against them. Vance called it political misdirection, like a magician waving one hand in the air while the other hand picked your pocket. Obama didn't just use charisma, he turned it into a weapon to keep people distracted.
The last point I want to make is, I got to say, and shocker, newsflash here, I've defended Kamala Harris once, I'm about to defend Barack Obama once. So set to the side the hectoring and the tone of Obama when he went in and talking about black voters, like whatever. Obviously, I just criticized.
Gutfeld's sharpest blow came when he targeted Obama's self-styled role as a moral guide. He mocked the sanctimonious tone Obama often used, lecturing Americans about civility, responsibility, and hope, even while his own record showed little real progress. Gutfeld argued it was the height of hypocrisy. A man giving sermons about accountability while overseeing bailouts for bankers, endless wars, and expanded surveillance. In Gutfeld's view, Obama wasn't a moral leader, but a smug preacher asking others to rise above while never lifting his own hand to change the system. Vance pushed the takedown to its harshest point, calling it a legacy of emptiness. He said that when you strip away the glamour, the speeches, and the endless media praise, there isn't much left to define Obama's presidency. No sweeping reforms that reshaped the economy. No foreign policy breakthroughs that changed the world. No major victories that endured with time. What remained was a presidency remembered more for how it looked than for what it achieved. Vance compared it to a Potemkin village of politics, a facade of greatness held up by appearances, hiding the hollowness behind.